Hello, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the second posting. I forgot, and Jeff, this is for you. A student emailed me and said, "Hey, can you kind of go over posting two because he was just curious as to why he lost the points that he lost." So I just wanted to talk about what our expectations were, and it was a very different assignment from the first posting. So if your grade decreased for the second posting, the two aren't necessarily related because the content was very different. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. But I think it's important that I at least talk about what our expectations were. Okay, so for the first part, it's pretty simple. I just ask you for the generic format of the three experimental designs: classic, post-test, pre-test, post-test only, and then the Solomon 4 group. So using the R's and the O's and the X's, where R's equal randomization, the O's equal the pre and post tests, and the X equals the stimulus, I simply wanted you to write them out like I have in the PowerPoint notes. Okay, so for example, for the classic pre-test, post-test, you would have two R's, okay, for randomization to the experimental to the control group. Both the experimental and the control group would have pre-test, so there'd be O's, and then the experimental group would get the stimulus, and the control group would not, it'd have nothing, and then for the post-test there'd be two O's again. And so I needed you to do that for the classic, the post-test only, and the Solomon 4 group. So that's what we expected there. In explaining the differences, I just wanted you to explain the differences. For example, for the classic design, you would just say, well, the difference between the classic and the post-test only is the post-test only doesn't have a pre-test. That's the difference, okay? The difference between the classic and the Solomon 4 group is that with the Solomon 4 group, not only do you have the classic design, but you also have the post-test only. You put those two together, that's the post-test. The reason why you do this is so you can try to disentangle any effects the pre-test might have on the stimulus together. Okay, so just kind of explaining the basic differences among the three is what I wanted there. For the hypothesis, I gave you a hypothesis, and then we wanted you to, explain how you would test that hypothesis using a specific experimental design. So I would expect, something like this. If you're using the classic design, you would have written down, okay, first I get my subjects and I randomize them to the experimental and to the control groups. With the experimental group, I give them, or actually with both the experimental and the control group, I give them a pretest. And on the pretest, I'm asking them about how favorable they feel towards President Obama, as well as a host of other questions. Then in the experimental group, they watch the negative news coverage of Obama. Okay, that's the stimulus. And in the control group, they watch Dancing with the Stars. Then after that, I give them a post-test, which is exactly like the pre-test, asking them about the favorability ratings towards the president, as well as a host of other questions. If I see a change in the dependent variable in the experimental group, but not the control group, and that by change I mean a decrease in favorability ratings, then you can attribute it to the stimulus. Okay, and so I would want that explanation or something very close to that written out. And when you have it written out like that, then it's very clear to me that you understand what an experiment is. Okay, you randomize your subjects to experimental control groups, you give them a pretest in which you're measuring the dependent variable, which in this case is favorability ratings. You give the experimental group the stimulus, the control group a placebo, and then you test the dependent variable, in this case favorability ratings again. Okay, and so we needed something very close to that. If you just said, I give them a post-test and a stimulus, or a pre-test, and then the stimulus and a post-test, and it was like a one-sentence deal, then you're going to definitely miss points because that's not telling me anything. Okay, so in these posts, and the last post is going to be a little bit different because it's basically math, but in the post, we just need a detail, so I have a good understanding that you understand the material and you understand how it works. In terms of threats, for the next question, really I gave you, in the book, talks about a host of internal validity threats. Remember, internal validity is the independent variable affecting the dependent variable, so causing a change in the dependent variable. So in this case, it'd be the stimulus, being exposed to the stimulus, being exposed to the negative news coverage, changing favorability rating. So threats to that in an experiment, there are like 9 of them. You could talk about testing, you could talk about um, mortality, okay, experimental mortality. You could talk about history, you could talk about regression to the mean, you can talk about all those, the instrument decay, any of those internal validity threats that I talk about and that the book discusses as well. And then in terms of whether experiments have high or low internal validity, it's always, generally speaking, it should have higher internal validity, and that's why you do it. Because remember, internal validity is that causal relationship. Is the independent variable causing a change in the dependent variable? And that's what it is. And so the answer for that should have been high levels of internal validity, okay, but low levels of external validity. External validity is basically generalizability to a larger population. Basically, that's what it is. So again, experiments versus non-experimental designs generally have high internal validity levels and low external validity levels. So that's what we needed your answers to indicate on the post. And that's it. So if you think that you had all of that down, and you still don't know why you missed certain points, then let me know. But for the most part, I think that now you will know, if you didn't get 25 out of 25, why that's so. And again, for the third post, it's going to be quite different from the second and the first, because it's going to be generally calculations, okay? And so if you want us to like check your work, if you're not very comfortable with the math, and you'll see that I kind of make it pretty easy, but still, if you haven't taken math in a while, you're not comfortable with it, to just show all your work. And so then we could, if we see your work, then we can say, aha, this is where you made the mistake. And then you could, learn from that, and then you could, practice again and hopefully get it right. If you just give us the answers with no work and you get it incorrect, then you're going to miss all the points. But again, if you show your work, we see where a mistake is, then at least we can maybe give you a partial credit for it, okay, because we can see where you made a simple mistake. No work and you get it wrong, then it's just, we can't give you the points. So be careful about that. But I'll talk a little bit more about that next week. And that's it for all. I hope everybody has a good weekend. Thanks.